We have to descend. We can only ascend as far as we have descended. You know, I feel in the darkest places is where I've touched God or the divine, because all darkness, everything, darkness and the light, it's all an aspect of the divine. And feeling our humanity that fully, feeling that hugely, as painful as it can be, that is a gift of our beingness, of our existence. That is God speaking to us in some way.
Hi, everyone. I'm Natalia Ochoa, and I was so inspired to create this podcast because I want to share a piece of wisdom that I'm integrating into my life currently. We all have the ability to create our own reality in which we can heal ourselves. Hopefully, through the conversations I'm passionately sharing, you'll discover the power of your own intuition. Hello, everyone. I am beyond passionate and honored to bring on today's guest. I am so just excited to talk about this topic because it's a topic that I love to talk about, and it's masculine and feminine energy and the embodiment of it. And because I love it so much, I was working with a mentor. Her name is Nina Lombardo. And after reading David Data's books, The Way of a Superior Man and Dear Lover, which are fantastic books. I read them and I never felt more understood as a woman. Went on his website and I was like, I need to learn how to embody this because I think it's so beautiful. And I was like, I know how sensitive and powerful I am deep down with this inner knowing that I have. And like I've mentioned in previous episodes, I really didn't like being a woman at all. Like I just didn't find the flavor of it. I didn't connect with myself as a woman and with my feminine aspect. I was really good at just my masculine, just go charging situation. But I realized that I wanted to be softer. I wanted to explore that softness inside of me. So I've been working with Nina and it has been a truly transformational time. She is an incredible, incredible mentor. And I have learned so much, specifically because I was always really afraid of truly showing my vulnerable side and how to be in love and relationship and all of these things because of like the qualms that we learn from society. And what is really enticing about her is that she brings a very fresh and new perspective on how to look at ourselves in this way. So a little bit about Nina. Nina Lombardo is a teacher, mentor, and artist who supports women in embodying their most authentic spiritual and sexual expressions. Through workshops, retreats, and private mentoring, she provides women with somatic-based tools to embody their love and deepen their capacity for intimacy and connection so they can create the lives and relationships they yearn for. I know that that is what she did for me. And my body is so open and so loving now because of the work that we've done together, because I do think that there is a big disbalance between understanding the true power of feminine and masculine energy and how it relates to us. And I think that there have been so many things that, that society has put on about dating that have totally been shattered with the work that I've done with her, because the most important thing in our lives are relationships. And if you really learn how to master and hone in on them, then you can have a successful relationship and you can feel just free in loving and being love. So that's what I'm really excited about. Hi, Nina.
Hi, Natalia.
How are you?
I'm going to throw a lot of emotion into the word good. The full spectrum of emotion.
I'm just so happy that you took the time to really feel into what you were feeling, because I was just mentioning how when we first started working together, you would be like, Natalia, how are you? And I would just like look up into my brain and I'd be like, I think I'm doing really well today. Thank you very much. And how so much of what we did and the work that we did was about really dropping into and being able to really explore our emotions and being able to vocalize them and express them as they're coming organically. Because I know that for me, and I still do it. I analyze my feelings and then I want to talk about it afterwards, but it's a practice that I'm still deepening within myself. How was that journey for you into starting to explore that within yourself into, maybe you've never had this problem of like, have you always been good at just expressing your emotions?
Definitely not. Definitely not. I think a lot of us can relate. My upbringing, no fault of my parents, we're all just doing our best, but my emotionality wasn't very welcome. So at a young age, I learned how to hide it to protect my tender little heart. I always was very in touch with my emotions, and I always felt I had a very vast emotional world on the inside, but showing that to others at a young age, I learned wasn't always safe. So I developed patterns to keep all of that inside. Actually, my outlet always has been music. I started playing piano at a young age, at the age of 4, and that was always the place I felt safest to express my emotions through my creativity, through my creative expression. So that was my outlet as a child, and then I really harnessed that and discovered that when I was a teenager, when I went to college, and I started picking up instruments and songwriting, and that's where a lot of my emotions were poured into, and where I learned how to take all of this big stuff I was feeling inside and have an outlet for that. And that was really, really, really important for me and my healing. And then from there, I started learning more skill how to express my emotion interpersonally with others and in relationship, which was a whole nother ball game and was a lot more difficult. It's, because the relational that I developed as a child in terms of expressing my emotions and being seen with them, those had to be healed in relationship. And I had to open my heart and express myself in relationship. And that's been an ongoing process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I completely relate to that because I have something really similar that for me, it was with acting. I felt very similar at a young age. I didn't feel like I could fully express myself, or because my parents didn't know how to even do it for themselves. So of course, how can they possibly pass it along to a child? And for me, it was acting because I was constantly emoting, and I was releasing. And with all of the exercises that we did, a lot of people don't really understand what it feels like to express what they're feeling in the moment.
Yeah, and that's because a lot of people have a hard time actually feeling what is present for them in the moment, because they've shut down a lot of that feeling. Like I mentioned, these childhood wounds we have, a lot of people just numb themselves as a protective mechanism. So they're not even in touch with their emotions. So before we can even begin the process of expressing our emotions freely, we have to first feel them. And that is a big journey. I don't say that lightly, because to feel years of accumulated emotions that we've been numbing ourselves to or suppressing can be very, very intense. And that unearths a lot in that process. And that's often the beginning of a spiritual journey for many people, when they unlock those gates and start feeling everything that they haven't given themselves full permission to feel. I think in order to feel all of that emotion and not turn into a total puddle, or like to feel like it's too much, because it can be overwhelming to unlock that and it can be very scary, we have to have support in some way. I really think it's important, whether that support is from another human, like a therapist or a friend, or from the earth, or from our own breath and spine and practice. In some way, we need to feel held so that all of those emotions feel safe to be felt fully.
Yeah. And I know that for me, Nina was huge in that there were sessions where I would just be crying and she would hold space for me. And I didn't even know how to, I felt embarrassed. I felt embarrassed for a feeling. I felt embarrassed for emoting. Sometimes I still do. And I feel like that I felt like that puddle, and it felt weak and everything. But that's why I encourage everyone to either work with someone that can be able to fully take you through that. And going back to like what you had said, I love that you talk about how opening your emotions is part of a spiritual awakening. I want to hear from you. What was your spiritual awakening like?
Very Very painful. Very painful and very intense. And, I think it really started with a healing crisis, a deep healing crisis. And it really began when I left home as a teenager and went to go live on my own, and then was confronted a reality of having to be an adult and take care of myself. I'll preface by saying that as a teenager, I was very rebellious. Did a bunch of drugs. I had a lot of sex. I was looking for a way out. I was looking for an escape. And the community, the place that I lived, and the culture and the family and the paradigm that I was born into didn't support the deep internal processes that I was experiencing. I didn't have a framework for them. And so I rebelled. I tried anything to break free from this paradigm that was handed to me because I knew that it wasn't right. But I didn't know what was on the other side. And that was my rebellious phase of just like, I know that this doesn't work. I know this paradigm of living, this culture, this overculture that I was born into, it does not nourish my soul, but I don't know what else there is. So I'm just going to numb out. I'm just going to numb out and I'm just going to rebel. So that was like my wild rebellious phase. And then when I left home and I went to college, which I think for a lot of people, going to college and being introduced to new ways of thinking and new professors who had insights and guidance to offer, and I studied philosophy. So I was introduced to a lot of new different ways of perceiving the world. And that's when I started getting into spirituality and dreams and lucid dreaming and yoga, and all of these things really started nourishing my life. And I started discovering that there's so many ways of being in the world that are in alignment with my truth and what I felt. And there's a lot of intensity that happened in there. I went through a huge depression, very, very, very low period of life, just at that time being bombarded with all this new information and just wondering my place in it all. And around the same time, I fell in love, and I had a boyfriend, and very soon after we started dating, he was diagnosed with leukemia. So here I was, this very rebellious, selfish teenager, did not give a fuck about anybody. And all of a sudden, I was confronted with this relationship that beckoned me to really be there for somebody. That really woke me up in a deeper way, that experience. And it also woke me up to the horrors of the allopathic medical system and how, this boy, this young man that I was with, his soul was very crushed in the process of going through chemo and radiation and a bone marrow transplant. His soul was sucked out of him. There was no nourishment in that process. There was no healing, true healing in that process for him. And I knew there had to be another way to heal. And granted, those medicines did heal his physical body, but they crushed his soul. So that process is what propelled me into my interest in the healing arts and alternative and holistic ways of healing, not just the body, but the entire being. Because I realized that you can't just heal the body. We're holistic beings. We have multiple layers to us, and they all need to be tended to together. And at the same time, learning about these new modalities of healing, I got really into herbalism. I ended up going to massage school and going to South America and learning indigenous healing modalities. And all of these really woke me up to this rich world of healing. And I started healing myself first and foremost and healing my wounds and really discovering the fragmentation that was within me and how to make that whole again. And I'd say that was the bulk of my 20s, was discovering that. And I'm grateful to be in a place that's beyond that healing process now, because I was very much invested in it. And now I feel that my life isn't so oriented around healing, but because of that journey I went through and this deep descent and rise, I feel capable of helping others through that process.
Yeah, which there's just so much to what you said, but first of all, just explaining and understanding that the healing journey, like it might be painful in the beginning or through a period of time, but then there is another side to it. There is, like, so when people are confronted with this deep fear of really challenging themselves to go to those deepest parts where they're so afraid to unlock all of these emotions and traumas and situations, I always say it's not Western or Eastern, it's not spiritual or, medical. It's both. It's and, it's both and. It's not one or the other, that we really just, like you mentioned, just combine everything to hit all of the marks, the spiritual, energetic body and the physical body as well, and the mind and everything. Thank you so much for sharing that so vulnerably. That's a really beautiful story. It's very big.
It's so important to offer that glimpse of hope to people who are in those pits of darkness. St. John of the Cross has a poem, The Dark Night of the Soul. And that is a process that we must go through. It's a necessary step so that we can bring them into the light. We have to descend. We can only ascend as far as we have descended. I feel in the darkest places is where I've touched God or the divine, because all darkness, everything, darkness and the light, it's all an aspect of the divine. And feeling our humanity that fully, feeling that hugely, as painful as it can be, that is a gift of our beingness, of our existence. That is God speaking to us in some way.
And what would you say to someone that's really struggling right now with understanding that and taking that first step, that they're deeply afraid? I talk to many people that are in this process and just they aren't even aware that there's something deeper to even uncover.
Right. That's a big question. When you asked it, I thought of the tarot deck and the symbolism of how the major arcana are set up as kind of the journey of human consciousness from the Fool, which is card 0, to the World, which is card 21. And they're set up in 3 layers, the cards. So the Fool rests at the top as infinite potentiality, and then there's 3 layers of 7 cards. The first layer, the second layer, and the third layer, which is also very synonymous with David Deda's work, who, as you know, I work closely with, and who has developed this concept of the 3 stages. And I also find that to be very similar. And you'll find, all throughout spiritual texts and philosophy, you'll find so many threads of continuity. I'll put that to the side for now.
Well, we're going to circle back to that.
Yeah, circle back. So the first layer of the tarot deck is all about the journey of the world that we were into, like the paradigm we were given. And I mentioned this as part of my own healing process of, we're all born into a paradigm, the paradigm of our family, the paradigm of our culture. And that is what we have to accept to some degree to survive. So we learn how to navigate that the best we can. We can master that domain, and we can make beauty from that domain. We can make money, our career, our whole lives. And some people never grow past that domain. They adopt the patterns and the beliefs their parents gave them, and they never question them. They never break out of them. They never question the paradigm of the society they live in. And we can't force someone to take that next leap. Whatever causes someone to go into the next domain, the next layer, stage 2 of cards, is fate or luck, or it's very, I don't know what inspires or catalyzes that. Sometimes it's a very traumatic event, or sometimes it's just some very small thing, smelling a flower or something like this, and sometimes it doesn't happen at all. So the last card in that first row is the Chariot, and the card, he's mastered, the man who sits in his chariot has mastered his external world. He's mastered this domain of existence. But in the card, there's this element of rigidity. Like he's really holding on, trying to keep it together, right? So you can kind of feel the tension in someone who might be starting to have a spiritual awakening. Like they're like, no, I don't want to leave this little bubble. I don't want to leave. Let me stay here. And that feeling starts bubbling of like, no, you have to let go. You have to let go. It's time to evolve. It's time to expand your consciousness into a new way. So the next row, the first card in that deck, depending on which deck or philosophy you follow, the first card in that deck is strength. Card 8, right? Because that's what it requires to let go. That's what it requires to let go of the paradigm that you've been given and journey into the underworld, to the depths of your darkest self and take that dark night of the soul. And that whole second layer is all about that journey. It's all about confronting that gunk within, healing the self, healing your wounds, and diving into your own darkness. That could take years, it could take decades, it could take lifetimes to digest and process and move through that phase, right? And then the third phase is reintegration, about reascending back into the world with that deep knowledge and that deep wisdom, and learning how to take those gems that you've received from this deep world that only you know. It's so hard to put language to it, which is why when you asked about my spiritual journey, I was like, oh my God, like there's just so much there. It's hard to, when I put words on it, it kind of dilutes the depth of the internal experience that I was having at the time of my dark night of the soul, So to bring that back into the world and to offer what you've learned as your gift to the world, that is the third phase, the third stage in David Deda's language, is offering your deepest gift to the world. And that last card is the world, and that's what it represents, is that complete integration.
Yeah, thank you for that beautiful analogy. I've actually never heard anyone describe it like that, and I think that it makes the most sense. And then it goes back to, we all have free will, and it's really our choice what we want to dive into and what layers. But to know that people are afraid of feeling the darkness, people are afraid of feeling that depression, of that everything, but it really is what reaches, or allows you to ascend.
And I think, to answer your question of, what do you tell people who are afraid to take that leap, is, ask them the question, what is your soul here to give? And are you giving that now? And when one can really sit and digest on that question and feel, am I living my soul's truth and my soul's purpose, and listen to what their body and their wisdom is telling them? Because as much as they try to resist it, there'll be a little voice in there telling you the truth. Like, you aren't. And follow that thread, follow the voice of your deep intuition, as deep as it may be, and as a foreign language it may speaking. That is the path to your evolution. Is that voice. It's your guide. It's your own unique guide. No one else can tell you what to do and what you need on your path. You can have guidance from others, but only you know what you are meant to give to this world. And that voice is that guide. So cultivate a relationship with that voice.
Yeah, and I think that because I know that a lot of people don't have this deep self-realization, or that they, when someone asks the question, they don't know, or they deflect, or they think that they know the answer. And what would you say then the difference between the analytical thoughts and then really going down into the emotion?
Well, the difference is where you're placing your awareness. And if I were working with someone in that space, I would invite them to just drop all their attention into their belly And maybe they could put their hand on their belly just to feel it. For some people, it's hard to put awareness on the inside of the body. So at first, I would just invite them to drop all their awareness into their belly. Feel their breath in their belly. Feel their hand on their belly. Notice the sensations in their belly. And then start giving names to what's there. Ooh, I feel tingling here. Or I feel a little ache in the left side of my belly. Just pointing out the physical sensations, and then moving deeper into more emotional sensations. Like, oh, I feel some anxiety. And then I'd invite them to breathe into that. And usually beneath all that tension, beneath all that stuff that we're not feeling, is where that intuition is lying. So for me, it starts in the body. Yeah. The journey starts in the body.
And I can tell everyone firsthand that that's what Nina did with me, and it really changed things up for me. It really opened up. Yeah. So I recommend it to anyone. So I want to talk about masculine and feminine energy. Can you give us your rendition of what the difference between what is feminine energy and masculine energy?
Well, first, what I want to say, what it's not. And masculine and feminine energy has absolutely nothing to do with one's gender. The way I use the terms has nothing to do with gender. So masculine and feminine are primordial energies that live within each human and live within all of existence. So that's the main gist of it. And the way I've learned this, and I imagine there's different interpretations of what masculine and feminine is from different schools of thought, but the way I've learned it, the masculine is the part of reality that is consciousness. So the part of you right now that is aware of me talking, aware of your breath, that is witnessing the world around you. It's the unchanging I that never changes from when you're born to when you die. There's just this thread of consciousness that is eternal and changeless. And that is the part of all of us, the part of existence, the part of animals, and that is the masculine. Consciousness is the masculine. The feminine is experience. The feminine is everything that consciousness is witnessing. So your body, your feelings, the world around you, your thoughts, your senses, nature and the elements, and all energy and all matter, anything you can perceive and experience is the feminine. And to put that all into one word, I would say that is love energy. The feminine is love, the vibration, the stuff of life, and she is ever changing, infinitely changing. She's not the same from one moment to the next. She's like nature, like the sun and the clouds and the volcanoes and the wind and the hurricanes. It's just constant life, abundance, growing, evolving, changing. That is all the feminine. So you can feel that in your own body, the part of you that is blood and pulse and bones and muscle and feeling. That is your feminine. So like a very easy understanding, the ocean is like the feminine, this wild force that's uncontrollable, and the ship is the masculine, steering the ocean to get from point A to point B, navigating the ocean. The masculine's attempt to control the feminine. The masculine in all of us tries to control chaos, right? Chaos is scary. Chaos is scary. It's scary to kind of submit to that power and to learn to flow with it and to feel it so deeply that you are really just in reverence to it. I think at some point in history, the masculine in all of us started feeling overwhelmed by that energy. Say, well, I need to learn how to control this. And so we developed agriculture, the very start of it. You know, agriculture, like, okay, let me control the elements a little. Let me control how I grow food. Okay, agriculture develops. And then that turns into society, and now it's just like air conditioning and packaged food and the way we treat women and, you know, just suppression of the feminine in so many dimensions.
In today's society, we only cherish productivity, goal setting, you know, how much are we
Exactly.
doing, how, you know, and people are attaching their sense of fulfillment and their sense of self with this. And then they discover that
Mm-hmm.
it actually doesn't bring this fulfillment because there's a disbalance.
And that disbalance is it's us not honoring our own feminine energy and needs.
Yeah, absolutely. So how would you say then, because does it live in both women and men? So how do the energies, you know, because you, of course, you explain that they're both
Mm-hmm.
in everyone, and it's just energy. So why would you say that the majority of
Mm-hmm.
men, you know, identify with that versus women that identify with the feminine?
I don't know why a lot of men identify with the masculine and a lot of women identify with the feminine, but it certainly um, isn't every man and woman and other genders. You know, every being can identify more with one or the other. So once
Mm,
you shed all the programming and patternings and conditionings of our internalized suppression of the feminine, like once we can really embrace both aspects of ourselves, then we can come back and really feel, where do I feel most at home? And there's different dimensions to this that David Data teaches. There's the spiritual, physical, emotional, mental. So there's all of those different domains in which we can identify more with the masculine or the feminine. So just on a spiritual level, for example, as I mentioned, the forces of the masculine and feminine energy, someone who identifies with the masculine spiritually will feel at home in nothingness, will feel at home in spacious consciousness. So masculine spiritual practice, traditional ones would consist of like Zen meditation is a very masculine spiritual practice where you rest in consciousness as consciousness. And that's bliss for people who identify more with the masculine. So for the feminine, and this is, you know, the revival of this feminine spiritual experience that is happening, the feminine feels at home in the love pulse of life. So her spiritual connection with the divine is found through life, through dance and intimacy and connection with nature, and through mothering and being engaged with life and singing, and all of these things are the feminine's way of connecting with the divine, and she'll feel at home in a spiritual practice such as those.
yeah,
And of
right.
course we might enjoy both of them as well,
Mhm.
so some people more are in the middle.
And to this day, I can't fully sit and meditate, and I've tried with different Buddhist practice, and I feel the most connected spiritually when I dance and when I sing and do these practices. So what does a feminine embodiment practice look like for you?
Well, there's different layers to it. And I think the most important layer is whatever embodiment practice you're doing, that it's coming from the inside out and not the outside in. So there's a way to dance that is very surfacey, you know, waving your body around and feeling the space around you and just shaking and moving without much connection to the inner world. And that is certainly a healing, wonderful thing to do. But for me, feminine practice is about feeling the pulse of love within your body, the pulse of sexuality, of energy alive in your spine, in your womb, in your heart, and pulsing through your entire being and moving that through your body.
And a lot of your pop-up classes, you talk about the importance of having a sacred feminine practice for those who deeply
Mm-hmm.
identify with the feminine. And why is that
Mm-hmm.
so important right now?
So if you want to connect more with your feminine essence, there's a lot of deconditioning the body has to go through, in order to not just connect with that part of yourself, but to move that that love, life energy through your body in a way that's unconstricted. The body has developed years and years of trauma, of patterning and conditioning around remaining closed and hardened because feminine energy has been so suppressed in our culture and demonized and weaponized. Like the expression of feminine sexuality, you know, just we can see in religious texts, for example, is evil to the masculine who can't deal with that chaos, the chaos of a woman erotically alive, right?
Right. Right. Because I had this thought before, and I think a lot of it also has to do with the fact that the masculine trying to control the chaos is going back to us wanting to control and us not wanting to fully surrender to what life brings us. And I know in our society, there's so many issues around gripping and controlling and suppressing. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, that's great. So feel how we've done that to ourselves first and foremost, like controlled and suppressed our own feminine expression, really to protect ourselves all throughout our lives. In my experience, and so many women I talk to and work with from a very young age, they were receiving unconscious sexual attention because they were so in their erotic, innocent joy as young beings, as young women growing through puberty, that they attracted toxic masculine attention, let's say. Unconscious is what I mean by toxic. That just wanted to take without sensitivity to that precious vital life force energy moving through her. And so she learned to close that up. We've learned to close our bodies, to shut down that vital life force, and to harden our bodies around it, and to be more masculine so that we can survive in the world.
And going back to the difference between it, regardless of gender, it's because there, for example, men that highly identify with their masculine, let's say, how important is it for them to also engage in this type of work, and as well as vice versa?
Well, it's important that all of us cultivate a healthy masculine and feminine. It's so that we can each be sovereign beings with a full life force capacity connected with our pleasure and our love and our beingness, and also the capacity to live a purposeful life and to provide structure for ourselves, to have a career and to make money. You know, these sorts of capacities are necessary. So to cultivate both of those into one human being creates a very sovereign, independent, fully expressed human, you know, and it's very important that we all do that. Some of us it might be easier in one domain than another. Right. So some people might have a very healthily developed feminine, but no masculine development at all. So if that was the case, I would encourage that person to take little every day to start building structure in their lives. And it might not be joyful for them. It might feel like not fun, but it's important to cultivate those skills so that they can be independent beings. And same with someone who's has developed highly masculine skills. And I would encourage them to take time every day to drop into their bodies, to experience pleasure, to make themselves a nourishing meal, to feel their feelings. And then they would be fully integrated.
I love that. And how does it work in the dynamics? I know you talk a lot about polarity between the feminine and the masculine in a romantic context. How does that play out?
Sexually speaking, polarity is happening all the time, whether we're conscious of it or not. So I'm going to use David Deda's language. And if you're listening, I highly recommend looking into his work because he's developed a lot of this work around masculine and feminine and polarity. So these 3 stages that I mentioned with the tarot. First stage, polarity with feminine and masculine energy, would look very much like we see like on reality TV shows or in the media, or just the general structure of our kind of unhealthy culture, where there's maybe a really hot model babe with, you know, huge breasts and just very surface shine. She might not be connected to her inner pulse of love light, but she's very radiant on the outside. that surface shine would attract attention, consciousness, which is the masculine. So surface shine is the feminine, attention, consciousness is the masculine. The level of shine is radiating from that surface level would attract an equally surface level attention. So someone whose consciousness is maybe not as deep as a Buddhist monk, but maybe he's very good at making a lot of money, for example. He's learned how to use his masculine capacities to be very successful in certain domains. So his money, aka his consciousness, attracts her surface radiance. And that would be like a very first stage polarity relationship between the masculine and feminine. And then in the second stage, you grow out of that. So the surface shine woman starts developing her masculine capacities. Well, I don't want to just be recognized for my surface shine. I want to be recognized for my intellect. So she starts becoming more equal in herself. Just like I've talked about being sovereign beings, she starts to develop her masculine depth and starts diminishing down her feminine radiance so that she can be appreciated for other qualities. And likewise, the rich, surface man would start deepening his feminine capacities and kind of dim down his intense surface masculinity and start embracing these more feminine qualities of himself. But in that second stage, there's not a lot of polarity because both people have become rather neutralized. So in the third stage, they grow out of that. They say, well, we can have a really nice relationship where we're both equal in the second stage. And that's really loving and really nice. But that feeling of like hot, passionate sex, like the feeling of being claimed and being desired and ravishing one another, I miss that. Like in the first stage, you have that, but it's kind of toxic, right? It's unhealthy. It could be abusive, right? If you think of like the example David often uses is like the 1950s housewife with like the bread-winning husband. That is a very polarized relationship of feminine and masculine energies, but it's unhealthy. They're living in their first stage in their patterns, right? So in the third stage, they're like, oh, I'm really missing that. I want to grow into that. How can I do that in a way that is deeply embodied and connected to something bigger than myself? And the way you embody polarity in that domain is by fully embodying these aspects of consciousness and love on a deep level. Like I was saying, the feminine practice I teach is about radiating love through the erotic body so that shines through our bodies, that it's felt through our bodies, that depth of love, not just surface shine, but a depth of love radiating out through our bodies. So in a third stage polarity practice, the feminine practitioner would choose to embody that deep expression of love, and the masculine practitioner would choose to embody his deepest expression of consciousness. And what that looks like is one partner fully in her body, and I'm using her, but it could be any pronoun, fully in her body, fully in the pleasure, fully in the bliss of being alive in a body, and the masculine lover is deeply witnessing her in that, holding the space, the container for her fullness to be liberated. And that is the dance of deep spiritual intimacy. It's not just surface sex. It's not just, this is nice, happy, equal sex, like what's missing, passion, right? It's divine sex. It's divine love. The feminine in all of us is aroused by being witnessed. Our light, like when we're embodying our shine, when we're embodying our light, we like that to be seen. And that's what is erotically a turn on for the feminine.
And that makes me think about just vulnerability in general and how, at least for me, I know, and for many other women, that it's so scary to express ourselves vulnerably because of all of the shadow aspects of ourselves. Like we of course want to share the love and the openness and the goodness, but then when it's turned, right, that's the part, at least when we were working together and I was going on several dates and I was just like, no, like I can't reveal that I'm annoyed at what he said. Like, no way, like I can't do that. So how would you encourage or say for women or for the feminine to be able to express that?
Yeah, well, it certainly takes time and it takes practice, because often what I've witnessed is so many of us haven't actually been given deep masculine presence and attention that is deeply trustable.
Mm.
Very, growing up as children, for example, we just don't live in a culture where any of this is really very prevalent. So when we actually do receive like utter, complete attention and presence on us, it creates a freeze response. Sometimes we're like, what do I do? Like, I thought I wanted to be seen and I wanted all of my heart to come out, but now that I'm getting this attention that I've always been desiring, I can't show any of it. What's going on, right? There's a freeze response. So it takes time to warm up to the joy and the pleasure of being deeply witnessed and deeply seen. So the way I often encourage women to practice is with each other in classes and groups that I lead. We hold that space for each other. So one woman will be the witness while the other one expresses her erotic pleasure through her body or expresses her vulnerable heart and her emotions while being deeply witnessed by a woman, which it feels often safer. So then when they're with a man, then they'll have a reference point, or with a lover. It's easy to practice in kind of a setting where you don't really know the person and they're just witnessing you, but you don't have any ties attached to them. Yeah. They don't know your history. There's no like emotional stuff. But all of a sudden, when you start having a relationship with someone, it becomes harder to really reveal those more tender parts of ourselves to some degree. So just warming up with someone in a safe container, I think, is a good place to start.
Yeah. And that also makes me think of, just because of how I express myself and like how I'm a lover, and I've always had this deep yearning, just to be with a lover. And I remember just thinking to myself so many times, like, no, that's wrong. Like, I'm not supposed to have this deep desire and yearning. And when I read David's books, I was like, oh my God, he gets it. It's like, he gets me. He understands. And you talk about the art of longing and how that's actually our feminine nature.
It's nothing you have to get rid of. And if you are one of the many people who, feminine beings who yearns for love so deeply, yearns for a partner, yearns for a lover, and when you have one, you think about them all day and you want, just know that that is not a weakness. And you don't have to hide that part of yourself. You don't have to hide that part of yourself to the one you love. It's important to not confuse that yearning with neediness. You don't need love to feel whole. You don't need another person's attention to feel good about yourself. All of that is not fulfilling, right? But the yearning is just an open-ended yearning to connect and to be connected with the one you love, and that's beautiful, and that should be shared, and that should be offered as a gift.
Yeah, a piece of advice that you gave me was share your love, share it freely and see who's able to receive it, and but not to hold back, because I know that for me, I would be like, no, this is too much, I can't, I'm going to come off as like they're, because we're taught to play these games, of no, you need to just leave them alone, and all of these things that we've learned. And I have found so much freedom in being able to just express myself freely and being like, no, like, I just am a loving being, and like, that's just who I am.
And that's the ultimate practice, right?
Yeah.
It's to always return back to the recognition that we are love. That's the ultimate feminine practice. I'd say the masculine aspect of that, and they're really two sides of the same coin, is always returning back to consciousness. And love and consciousness, language is so limited, but they are really one. They're one. It's like the yin and the yang, right? It's one. So returning back to your pulse of love, when all your old patterns and all your childhood wounds are going to say, you're not loved, and they're going to arise in various ways to disrupt that practice you're cultivating. When you least expect it, something will be triggered in a relationship where it will feel like love is leaving you. And that is the precise moment to breathe, to drop back into the heart, back into the belly, and feel that pulse of love within you, to recognize, oh, love can't leave me. I am love.
Yeah, and going back to what you were asking, you were talking about the intimate partner. I mean, there's definitely a lot of types of relationships, but two intense relationships, ones that you meet and it just feels like this karmic soul relationship that can be sometimes very volatile, and that your emotions just go up and down, but those are just so charged and you are so drawn to them. So can you talk about the difference between karmic, relationships, or why you're drawn to that, versus relationships that really kind of just make you feel not that spark?
I'd say what you're describing, I think a lot of people refer to it as like the twin flame dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's someone that you kind of have some karmic stuff to work out with, perhaps. And by karma, I mean patterns and stuff you've carried from one life to another that are given to you as gifts to overcome in this life. And we may overcome them or we may not, but we inherit them from past lives, and we can learn from them, or we can keep repeating the same mistakes, keep repeating the same patterns. So karmas are basically patterns that we've inherited either from this life or from a past life. And sometimes we have karmic relationships where we need to work out the pattern with someone else. I am often wary of relationships that start with a big bang, a big like, oh my God, I feel all this passion. It's love at first sight. Da, 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 da. And what I'm feeling in someone's body as they're telling me this is they have found the love that they've always been seeking as a child and never got. Their child self is like, this person is the key to that love that I've been seeking my whole life. But underneath that, before they really get to know the person, what's happening on a vibrational level is that person actually mimics the vibration of their childhood home. So it feels like love to them, and they feel like they'll be able to work out this karma with them because they mimic the vibration of their family home, of their parents who didn't love them the way that they yearned for. So we seek to heal these wounds with people who have the same vibrational patterns as our family home unconsciously. So it feels like love when we meet them. We're like, yes, my soul is going to finally work this out. I finally found a person who I can work this out with. And while it is very possible to transcend those patterns together in relationship, often is what ends up happening is that person triggers the same exact wounds of taking love away from you as your parents did, has the capacity to leave you in the same way your father did. And you don't know that at first, but you'll meet them and you'll be like, oh my God, this is the person, this is the one, I love them. And your heart will start opening, and then all of a sudden they'll abandon you in some way. That's an important lesson to look at. So we unconsciously attract people who will love us the same way our parents did or didn't. And often those relationships that mimic the vibrations of our family homes will feel like passion and obsession and lust and, oh my God, I found my soulmate. Because on some level, the soul thinks it can work out its childhood wounding through this person. And this is all happening on a nervous system level. We don't do this consciously. But most of us will discover that those relationships that start in that passion, in that sort of obsessive feeling that I think a lot of us have probably experienced, they usually don't end well. And that's for a reason. Those relationships were brought to us. We attracted those relationships to work out those wounds. But what happens is that we become so enamored with the passion and that obsession and that feeling of oxytocin that just takes over the body, that when it happens to us, even after a horrible breakup with the last one, we fall back into the trap. And it keeps repeating over and over because the wound hasn't been healed yet. And we're not ready to heal it. But eventually, there'll come a time when we're just like, why am I doing this? Love shouldn't hurt this much. That's when we wake up to the pattern that we're in, and we choose to not repeat it. And it usually takes doing things in a very different way. It requires us to do things in a very different way. So that might mean in this instance, if you're used to relationships starting with an intense, heated passion and lust and obsession, that maybe if that starts to happen in another relationship, end it. As hard as it's going to be, because all those chemical feelings in the body are going to want you to engage, end that relationship, and then maybe try dating people who bore your nervous system a little, or who just feel where that passion isn't there, and give that a chance and start connecting with something deeper than the patterns, feeling into the bigger picture of what do I really want in intimacy? What do I really yearn for beyond the heat of passion that will inevitably fade once all our wounds start coming up? What do I really want in a relationship? And start attuning your heart to that when you date people. If you want a conscious partner, attune to their consciousness. Feel how deep they live in their lives. Feel how trustable they are. And make your decisions based on that. It might not ignite your lust in the same way as the other relationships had, but it will be a slow burning flame that is much more sustainable and much deeper and in alignment with what your deep heart and soul actually wants.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I think that was a really beautiful way to end our conversation. And even though I think that we could talk for hours on hours and hours, and I'm sure I'll have you back.
I know, time went by so fast.
Yeah. And but I just wanted to ask you, if someone is interested in this work or interested in working with you, like, please let us know all the ways that you can be contacted and followed.
Well, my website is called wayofdevotion.com, and I work primarily with women who are wanting to cultivate deeper relationship with their feminine energy and also magnetize polarity and deep spiritual intimacy in their relationships. So I offer private one-on-one mentorship, and I also offer group programs as well, and I offer spontaneous classes every now and then. But if you go to my website, we can stay in touch that way, and you can contact me there.
Amazing. And what about Instagram's also Way of Devotion?
Instagram, Way of Devotion, all one word.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Nina, for your time and for your attention and your incredible wisdom. Like I've mentioned, all of this has fully been able to transcend my healing journey, and I'm just so deeply grateful for you to take the time to come on and share this with everyone, because I hope that anyone can take away from something that we talked about, so you can we can start healing this whole dynamic on a worldwide level. So thank you so much, and till next time. Thank you so much for joining. If you found this podcast enlightening, please like, subscribe, share, and follow Power of Your Intuition _podcast on Instagram. This is available on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube, and you can join my newsletter at nataliachoa.com.